you've got your cuddly coat on.
Yes, I do. I'm always cold. Comes back. Did you? Oh, that is wonderful. Hey,
That's something for you.
okay. Did you do my puzzle? Oh, you are man. How much do I owe?
Kimberly's doing a little better. She's very adjacent to her health. Chemo. So
Oh, yeah. Wasn't it?
we'll figure out time that or it wasn't doing what it was supposed to.
Yeah. Before I do a hike, I'll always do it. So yesterday I did a freedom hike. In the valley. Oh, yeah.
We'll see about it.
Vindicator. Walgreens there. Did a break mile, 3 miles. It didn't rain on me while I was hiking. Of course, the skies were clear. I wasn't too worried about it.
Well, I'm hoping they have to like radiator back. And he's the guy who's got the radiator. So it slipped and burnt a hole in that hose. That's what I should fix.
Hey, Keith. Hey, Ralph. I don't understand.
And so I called him and he said, no, you're right, it's a radiator and no, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
She told me he's gonna bring stuff every time he comes home. That's what she said. That's how I am.
Yeah.
So Wednesday's the big day. My cow, you know, going off.
I'll keep that.
I'll stay back when I'm mowing the lawn. The streets and trim it and don't, I do have Friday, not Thursday. Well, I do have Friday. Oh, yeah.
Going down by football.
So I did that, I cut myself, said, you stop, you need a street.
It's almost like, you know, that you want to do. That was me and my friend Saturday back in Boston. And she had a girl that she's due to come down here and we done more than 2 Saturdays and that girl didn't know what she was there. Because me and Courtney were saying, like, you know, I know she's still working for this, I'm just gonna go to that, right? Trust me, that would keep your body up. Stop and get on her phone or she's on her phone. She thought she was paid for it. I know. Well, that's funny. That was already. Just take more young.
Nexus is a meadow where some military in the area practice. So that was
Lots of good hiking up by the bike. You drive your car up to the park. And if you need something to eat, they can improve the restaurant.
When he saw me steady, he ran away.
Station.
Until,
Yeah,
depending on the weather. I plan to go back. That's okay. I'll take a share.
So it's a good place to eat. There's better restaurants down here. Just get up there, eat, you go out on the deck.
But it's just so close to the driveway.
Oh, yeah.
I needed some.
But we also take the Lloyd's. She'll be free to take the expense. Lloyd's one of my favorites. Yeah, but she'll be free to get out there. She's right there.
Oh, man.
And then she's going to
You can look up the summit,
You won't
summit
a couple of days ago.
online. Just go to 5 speed highway.
I said, well, I said,
Right now, my schedule is
Well, it's a nice drive. I mean, it's scenic drive. But you don't want to go up there in the winter because you can slide on the roads and you can fall a couple thousand feet.
It's the dates where I have to sit in a chair in a YouTube all day.
Good morning. 1 minute warning.
I'll be back on Memorial So you think I should take the jack? And I gave her the option to either take the jag or take mine, you know, I didn't care which one we took. So.
All right, good morning, everyone. And we have internet this morning, isn't that great? All right, so we are continuing our lesson on costly sacrifices this quarter. 18th of May, we only have one more lesson this quarter. So then it'll be summer quarter. Can you believe that? Okay, so this today is Worship is Restored. The month of May, we've been doing the Old Testament. We did 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Today is Ezra. And then next week, we go to Nehemiah. Okay, so our lesson today, context for the lesson, Jews from the tribes of Judah and Benjamin were allowed to return to their homeland after their exile in Babylon. You may remember from their exile in Babylon, book of Daniel, and when they were taken from their home there in Judah and the tribes of Benjamin, they were taken to Babylon in exile. Their neighbors to the north had been taken a couple hundred years earlier to Assyria, but then Assyria got absorbed into the Babylonian Empire. They were conquered. And then the Babylonian Empire became the Persian Empire, and then, of course, the Greek Empire. I have Jews there highlighted in red. We know the passage is Acts 11:26. Christians were first called, disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Well, do you realize the Israelites were first called Jews during the exile? First appearance of Jews is the very end of the book of 2 Kings. And by far, Jews is mentioned all but one time. The only mentions of Jews in the Old Testament is in Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, especially Jews, especially in the book of Esther, unfortunately, because they were trying to exterminate one group, the Jews. So they're allowed to return. Judah's return from exile was a lot different than Israelites' return from Egypt. God did not have a Moses here that said, "Let my people go." God actually had the emperor of the Persian emperor, Cyrus, was the one who let the people go. The Lord moved Cyrus to do this through a decree. And this was prophesied in the book of Isaiah, even before Cyrus was born, who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd." In another passage, Cyrus is called the Lord's anointed one, and he shall fulfill all my purpose, saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple the foundation shall be laid. So two purposes that Cyrus has here, given from God, is to rebuild Jerusalem, which was, of course, destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the temple, which was devastated by Nebuchadnezzar, and all the items from the temple were taken to Babylon. Okay, they needed to rebuild the city of Jerusalem, as mentioned there in Isaiah 44, and also to rebuild the temple of the Lord. I did something wrong?
No.
Yeah, just click the button. Once.
Okay.
Blacken it out. Again.
And I went ahead several slides. Okay. So, needed to rebuild the city of Jerusalem and the temple of the Lord. Well, let's find out a little bit about Ezra. On the table back there is a handout for Ezra for today's lesson, and on the other side there's Nehemiah next week. Okay, find out a little bit about Ezra. There is a key verse in Ezra in chapter 7, verse 10. It's not in our lesson today, but it's generally considered the key verse. I like this picture here. Had nice colors. The one complaint I have is the artist did not do a good job of doing noses. Look at that one. Okay. I'm having clicker problems today. If you look at the one guy, looks like he's got a pig's nose, doesn't it? And this guy, there's Ezra also. The rest of them are okay, but I like the picture here, the colors. For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord, and to do it, and to teach the statutes and rules in Israel. Now, I thought that this would make a good outline for a sermon, but I've never heard a sermon on this. We got an intro, set his heart. You know, if you're going to do something, you have to set your mind to it. And then point 1, study the law, do it, and then teach it. And keep in mind, Ezra was doing this while he was in exile, did not have access to the temple and all the resources there, but he managed while in exile to study the law and then do it. Paul said that was a difficult thing to do, doing the law, because they couldn't keep the law, and then to teach it. Imagine you're trying to teach something and then you're a bad example or you can't do it yourself. So and Ezra was a good man. The Lord was with him. The king realized that the Lord was with him. Now the books. Why books? Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, those three make up the post-exile historical books of the Old Testament, and tradition considers them to be one book, and it's listed there where the traditions come from. Okay, Ezra and Nehemiah, we have it sort of in the first third of the Old Testament, but Ezra and Nehemiah, along with Chronicles, are actually the last part of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Tanakh, the law, the prophets, and the writings. So it comes toward the end here.
Was it Ezra or Nehemiah that pulled the hair out of those who were married to foreign wives?
That would be Ezra. That would be Ezra.
Bit of a hair puller.
Yes, yes. So Ezra covers two distinct time periods. That's mentioned there in the handout. These two time periods cover about 20 years each. The first, Ezra doesn't even appear in the first 6 chapters of the book. It's the return under Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel, who would be the governor, and Yeshua, or Joshua, who was the high priest. And the first return, their objective was to rebuild the altar, to rebuild the temple. And then we have a 60-year gap, and then we have the reforms under Ezra, as you said, dealing with those who had intermarried. The events of Nehemiah take place during the second period. There's a 60-year gap, and then the events in Esther take place between the two periods. And then here's sort of a diagram of it, where we have, make sure I push the right button, where we have the first 6 chapters of Ezra right in here. This is where we have the edict here under Cyrus to let the people go. And they start working, they get to work here. And then the people of the land say, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? Why are you rebuilding this? Who gave you this authority? They were starting to work, and they said, you need to stop this. And they got a decree from the emperor to say, you know, a stop work order from the emperor. So they stopped work, and then they worked on their own thing. You know, you're working on a project, and then something comes up, and you have to stop. And then you do this other thing, and how hard is it to get started again? You know, you're cleaning out the garage, and then something else comes up, and then, okay, now I can clean out well, I don't have to start right now. So they get re-motivated again, and then we get in Haggai, he sort of re-motivates them. We have this red period here. Nothing is in Book of Ezra about this period. Cambyses, he pretty much left them alone. His goal was to bring Egypt into the Persian Empire, and he did not succeed. Alexander would be the one to do that. So they get Haggai and Zechariah, the Lord sends these 2 prophets to get them motivated again. So he gets them motivated again, they start work again, then they have to stop work again. So our lesson today is in Ezra chapter 3. Here's where I mentioned Haggai and Zechariah, the prophets. Haggai and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. We could just say the Lord, in the name of Yahweh. Then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Yeshua, is what ESV calls him. Joshua in the NIV, the son of Josedek, arose and began to build the house of God, that is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. So here's Haggai's motivation. What got them back to work? They were having problems, and they wonder, why does all their work lead to nothing? And Haggai tells them, he says, you looked for much, and behold, it came to little. And when you brought it home, I blew it away. Why, declares the Lord of hosts? Because my house that lies in ruins, while each of you busy yourselves with your own house. Therefore the heavens above you have withheld the dew, and the earth has withheld its produce. And I have called for a drought on the land and the hills, and on the grain, and on the wine, and on the oil, and what the ground brings forth, on man and beast, on all their labors. So now they find out why they haven't been succeeding in all their efforts. Their work has led to nothing. It's because the Lord is angry with them, because they've returned to their own needs, caring for themselves, and have forgotten about building the temple of the Lord, which was their intention in the first place. So we'll get back to this here. And okay, make sure I don't push the wrong button. So we're about right in here. So they're getting back to work, and then they come again and they stop work. So they say, well, Cyrus gave us the mandate to do this. And they said they did. So they send back to headquarters, back in Babylon, and they check the archives, and sure enough, they find it, and they find that where Cyrus had told them that they were able to do that, so then they can get back to work. Now, something interesting happened in this time period. We mentioned it earlier. Before Ezra, during this 60-year period, they intermarried with the people of the land. Something that the returning Jews had avoided doing when they were in Babylon, but now they get back home, and during the Assyrian exile, they took Israel, the northern kingdom, into captivity, and then they brought people from other areas and then brought them down to fill the space that they voided. Okay, the authors of the book, uncertain, I believe Ezra wrote Ezra, and we have the memoirs of Ezra and Nehemiah. Those are distinguished by the fact that they're written in the first person. I did this, I did that. Persian archival documents, those would be the sections in Ezra that are written in Aramaic. And then Jewish lists, Jewish archaeologists. There's a lot of genealogy of Ezra. Central characters, Zerubbabel. He was the governor that led the first group back. Their mandate was to rebuild the altar and rebuild the temple. And then we have Ezra, that he comes back about 80 years later. He's a priest and a scribe, which is kind of interesting. What does a priest do when there's no temple? There's no altar. You feel, well, I don't have anything to do, but still he was motivated to study the law, even though he was a priest without a temple. He led the second group, and then Nehemiah, next week, he was the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, and then he returned when he heard from his brothers who had just come back from Jerusalem that the city is in disrepair. It's a disgrace. The walls have been torn down and they haven't been rebuilt. Now, the Edict of Cyrus, we spoke about that. That's in Ezra 1, 2 through 4. Elements. Cyrus acknowledges that the Lord Yahweh, he acknowledges him as the God of heaven. He acknowledges that his power, his strength as king comes from this Lord. He realizes that he has a mandate from the Lord to release these people so they can go about rebuilding the city, rebuild the walls, rebuild the city and rebuild the temple. So he releases the people. It's totally voluntary. They do not have to go. It's the people that the Lord had moved, and he provides some material support for them. He releases some of the gold and silver vessels that were taken by Nebuchadnezzar. So then, continuing with the introduction, then the family heads of Judah and Benjamin and the priests and the Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved. Now earlier it said that God had moved the heart of Cyrus to release them. Now God is moving the heart of the people to return. They prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. So this is about 800 or 900 mile journey that they would have to undertake. And we know from Ezra that this takes about 4 months to make this trip if you're in a large, if you're traveling with a large group. All their neighbors assisted them with articles of silver and gold and goods and livestock and with valuable gifts, in addition to all the free will offerings. So this sort of echoes, remember what happened in Egypt. Yeah, in Egypt, when they left Egypt, the Egyptians gave them all this stuff and said, get out of here and don't come back. So this is similar, except in this case, it's the neighbors that helped them, the ones that didn't go. King Cyrus brought out the articles belonging to the temple of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and had placed in the temple of his God. This is sort of a divine intervention. Generally, when kings ransack this and they get the gold and the silver, what do? Melt it down, turn it into money. But they were kept in the temple of Nebuchadnezzar's God. There were, and then it tells 5,400 pieces of gold, silver. Sheshbazzar brought all these along with the exiles when they came up from Babylon to Jerusalem. So they had a lot of gold and silver items with which they could furnish the temple. Then we have this genealogical list, or a list in Ezra 2. These are the people of the province who came up from captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to their own town. So it's talking here in chapter 2, not everyone that came up, but people that were in Jerusalem that had been taken into exile. These are these people here. In company with Zerubbabel, Joshua, Nehemiah, and these people here. You'll see a Nehemiah and a Mordecai there. Those are not the Nehemiah and Mordecai that you know. These are other people, just have the same name. The whole company numbered 42,360, and that brings along the number of livestock and people. That sounds like a big number, doesn't it? This could have been in the millions. Only 42,360 out of all the people that had been taken into captivity. Now this could include the Babylonian captivity. This could include also the Assyrian captivity, because the Assyrian captivity then merged into the Babylonian, because Babylon took over Assyria. Remember, there were 3 exiles. First exile, 605 BC till edict was 66 years. Remember, first exile, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Second exile, 58 years. Think Ezekiel here. Third exile, 47 years, and not really anyone prominent as you would know. Mostly the king that was in charge there that was taken into exile in Babylon. So it was likely these 2 right here. Mostly this people here. So 47 years they are returning. So the temple's rebuilding would require a lot of effort from the people. You know, it had pretty much been level there, everything except the foundation. Money, time, labor, and good leadership. Money, not so much as Solomon's temple. David and Solomon were fabulously wealthy. And David had in mind to build a magnificent facility for the Lord. He gave his instructions and a lot of supplies to his son Solomon to carry that out. The first step, start with a small step. First, rebuild the altar for burnt offerings. Do that first. You can get that done in, a week or so. And that tells you that worship could begin before the temple was built. So they could have worshiped the Lord, probably did, while they were in captivity. We think of Ezekiel and Ezra, all those people there, you know, they could still worship the Lord. They couldn't do sacrifice, but they still could, you know, bow down the lead. You know, what did Daniel do?
How much of that temple was left, or was it totally razed to the ground?
I think it's probably gone. It was gone. The foundation?
Its footprint.
Yep. So here's what we're going to be looking at. People gather. Leaders take charge. Upper level, we think of Zerubbabel and Joshua. But then they also placed leaders under them. As Moses learned, you can't do everything by yourself. His son-in-law told him, you need to appoint others. So they appointed other Levites, you know, over smaller projects. Okay, when the 7th month came, 7th month seems to be important here. We read a lot about the 7th month during time of Solomon when they were building their stuff. So 7th month came, the Israelites had settled into their towns, so that minimum 47 years they've been gone, so they remembered where their towns were, and they went back to those towns. Now there were other people living in those towns, the people that were displaced from other areas moving in there. So they assembled together with a common purpose. That's what as one person means, a common purpose. Then Joshua, the son of Jozadak, and his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and his associates began to build the altar of God of Israel to sacrifice burnt offerings on it in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So we have two things here. Build the altar in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, and sacrifice in accordance with is in the law of Moses. Is it one of them or both of them? A and B in accordance with, or is it A in accordance with, or B in accordance with? So what does it mean to build the altar in accordance with the law of Moses? Did he give instructions on that? Turns out he did. Exodus 20. What's in Exodus 20? The 10 Commandments. So this isn't right after the 10 Commandments. He gives instructions on how to make an altar. I think this verse is kind of interesting. If you make an altar of stones, as opposed to just a mound, for me, do not build it with dressed stones, or you will defile it if you use a tool on it. So don't make it with an iron tool. That defiles the altar. Now this next one's kind of interesting. And do not go up to the altar, do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed. I said, wait a minute, I've read Exodus, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that's, I've never read that before.
I hadn't either. Maybe if you remember, maybe if you look at the ESV, don't go up to my altar on steps, or your nakedness may be exposed. Okay, yeah, I remember a lot where he talks about nakedness, but that's kind of it. Don't go up there because people will be looking at you. You know, did they not wear underwear? You know, there's a saying, I don't know, Gordon, if you, what does the Scotsman wear under his kilt? So, but look at that. Don't use dressed stones, and don't you have steps. So yeah, we got him there. Okay. What do you think is the value of having large numbers of Christians from a wide area attend a worship event? Nation, you know, area-wide worship events.
It reinforces our communion, our fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, if you were, say, like a lectureship or something like that, or a gospel meeting, some places may have very few Christians. And to be in a group of common believers, similar believers, really raises their spirits.
Yeah. Now, the last time I remember having that here. Larger was the teen youth forums.
Yes.
I know we see on the board there, like Tri-Lakes or someone will have an area singing and stuff like that. So, you just get to meet others, see what their experiences. How can we maintain unity among dispersed believers when gathering regularly in person is impossible? COVID. Remember, we had to do that. We weren't seeing each other, and then finally when we came back, it was like fist bumps, things like that, and masks. Okay, rebuilding the altar. Despite the fear of the peoples around them, they built the altar on its foundation. So there was a foundation there, perhaps also for the temple. And they sacrificed burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and the evening sacrifices. Now, burnt offerings, those took a while. It's like, how do you like your meat? Very, 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 very well done. Turn it to ashes,
Well burnt.
Yeah, so except for the hide, everything was burnt. So those took a while, and you had to put a lot of wood on the fire. Okay, these enemies. Who were these enemies? The peoples around them. When the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were building a temple in the Lord, they came to Zerubbabel and to the heads of the families, and they said, "Let us help you build the house, because like you, we seek your God." Oh, that's sweet of them, isn't it? Yeah. Didn't the same thing happen to Nehemiah? Oh, you're here to build a wall. Let us help you. Let us help you. Nehemiah said no. So let us help you build, because like you, we seek your God and have been sacrificing to him since the time of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here 200 years ago. So, they're speaking the truth, or the half-truth. They have been doing that since the time of Esarhaddon.
Back in the day of Daniel, during Nebuchadnezzar's reign, a group called the Chaldeans were really giving the Jews a hard time. And this is almost a replay of that.
Mm-hmm. So these people, under the guise of, let us help you, and then when they don't, then they hire counselors to go against them. So they said, well, we've been sacrificing since 200 years. Now, when the king of Assyria brought the people from Babylon, these areas, to fill in the areas down here in Judah, where the other displaced Israelites were living, they took over Samaria and they lived in its towns. When they first lived there, they did not worship the Lord, so he sent among them and they killed. So he sent lions among them and they killed the people. Well, that's not good. It was reported to the king then what was happening. The people you deported and resettled in the towns of Samaria. This is essentially, Samaria is what they called the displaced northern kingdom. And they do not know what the God of that country requires. That's a common thought. Gods were territorial. Gods were territorial. Remember when Naaman was cured of his leprosy? He asked him, can I take some of this soil back with me so I can worship on this soil? He has sent lions among them which are killing the people because the people don't know how to worship the Lord of the land. Then the king of Assyria gave his order, have one of the priests you took captive from Samaria go back to live there and teach the people what the God of the land requires. So one of the priests who had been exiled from Samaria came back to live in Bethel. Remember Dan and Bethel? Yes. The places. And Bethel is just a little bit north of Jerusalem. And they taught the people how to worship the Lord. But he forgot one important thing. This is how you worship the Lord, but this Lord is a jealous God. That's not enough. Part one is you worship him. Part two, you give up all other gods. Even while these people were worshiping the Lord, they were serving their idols. To this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did. So these people were in the land, and unfortunately, the Jews intermarried with these people. So by the time Ezra got there, about 80 years later, this became a big problem that he had to deal with. Okay. Then in accordance with continuing, then in accordance with what is written, they celebrated the Festival of Tabernacles with the required number of burnt offerings prescribed for each day. Remember last week's lesson? They were doing the celebration for the altar, dedication of the altar, and that was immediately followed by the Feast of Tabernacles. So this is the same time of year, around October, September, October, as when the altar during Solomon's time was dedicated. After that, they presented the regular burnt offerings, the new moon sacrifices. New moon sacrifices every month. They had a lunar calendar, and the first of the month was the new moon. I was wondering, why not make it the full moon as opposed to the new moon? It's a lot easier to tell when there's a new moon than a full moon. I've looked up, we got the full moon today. And then I checked, no, full moon is not till tomorrow. You can't tell the full moon. It looks pretty much the same for 3 days, but the new moon, you can tell right then it's the new moon. So they celebrated the new moon sacrifice, the sacrifices for all appointed sacred festival of the Lord, as well as bringing the freewill offerings to the Lord. And on the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, though the foundation of the Lord's temple had not yet been laid. So what activity is missing from here in the 7th month? The Day of Atonement. Why weren't they celebrating the Day of Atonement? You need 2 things for the Day of Atonement. You need the temple, and where does the high priest go? Into the most holy place, and he puts blood on the Ark of the Covenant. Where's the temple? Where's the Ark of the Covenant? So how do you can't do the Day of Atonement. So, how do annual celebrations like Christmas or Easter impact your faith? We get a few different songs during Christmas service, don't we?
Ask Kevin.
Kevin, do we get some different songs?
Yes.
And then you asked him once, why aren't we doing this? And he says, because it's not Christmas. Annual celebrations, I think we think more about, we think about the death of Christ, of course, Lord's Supper, but like Christmas, we think more like the gift that God gave us, sending his son. Easter, the fact that he died for us. How have you used these celebrations as opportunities to share the gospel message with unbelieving friends or family members? Maybe invite them to the service. And you tend to have, your family members visiting on Christmas. Restored for worship. So I don't think the building looked like that. I don't think they had a stepladder. Rebuilding the temple. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters, and gave food and drink and olive oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre. This is what Solomon and David did. Remember, David had a good relationship with Hiram, king of Tyre. Tyre, he had all the masons, the carpenters. He had people skilled in these activities, how to cut down trees, how to work lumber. And David had agricultural supplies. So essentially, Hiram, Lebanon provided raw materials, and then in return, Israel provided food and drink to pay for them. They brought this to the people of Tyre and Sidon so that they would bring cedar logs by sea from Lebanon to Joppa as authorized by Cyrus, king of Persia. That's in the decree that he made, letting them go back.
So when they came back in those various 3 waves, the state of the land must have been quite horrific to look at. Mm-hmm. And yet, what I'm seeing is because they are an agrarian community, a society, a nation that grows things, the olive trees, the fruits and the vegetables, I'm sure that became their GDP. And they used that to get those cedar logs from Lebanon.
Yeah, I remember when the 12 spies were sent up, the grapes that they brought back. They said, yes, it's a land flowing with milk and honey, but it's also a land of giants. So the journey from Tyre to Joppa, think of Joppa, New Testament, that's where Peter was staying when he saw the vision. So it's about a 90-mile journey there. So here's Tyre up here, and of course here's the cedars of Lebanon. They cut down the wood, brought it to the seaport here. Tyre has a very good seaport, and then also Joppa. So they brought it down 90 miles, and then of course they had to go these last few miles and go from sea level essentially up to 2,500 feet. Had to bring all that lumber. And then here's a depiction, a stone depiction of the effort. And then there is a cedar of Lebanon. In the second month of the second year, so it's about a year to get all this lumber there, to get all the supplies there, the lumber and the stone. After their arrival at the house of God in Jerusalem, Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel, Joshua son of Josedek, and the rest of the people, the priests and the Levites and all who returned from captivity began the work. They appointed Levites 20 years and older to supervise the building of the house of the Lord. So delegation of authority here. One thing about Levites, they begin their service at 20 years of age. And I think Levites are the only one mentioned where they end their term of service. Levites are appointed between the ages of 20 and 50 because these are the heavy workers. These are the grunt workers. Priests are, you might say, they're the brains. Levites are the brawn. They do the work. So after 50, they're allowed to retire. Joshua and his sons and brothers, and Kadmiel and his descendants of Hodaviah, and the sons of Henadad, and their sons and brothers, all Levites, joined together in supervising the work on the house of the Lord. So they are organized. They've got supervisors. Hopefully they know what needs to be done, and they can supervise others who are doing the work. Laying a foundation, musical praise, and mixed reactions from the people, the young versus the old. When the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, so it sounds like maybe it wasn't there. They're laying the foundation, or maybe clearing the foundation of the temple of the Lord. The priests in their vestments and trumpets. Thank you, David. He's the one who came up with those. And the Levites, the sons of Asaph. Asaph was a musical person during the time of David. He was in charge of the people that played the cymbals. I'd wonder, it's probably easier to play the cymbals than to play a piano or an oboe or something. And when you smash them together, right? They took their places to praise the Lord as prescribed by David, king of Israel. So this is going back several hundred years. So David put this in place, and they're still using that. So here's the praise. With praise and thanksgiving, they sang to the Lord. He is good, his love toward Israel. And here comes the cymbals. And all the people gave a great shout to the Lord because the foundation was laid. So this is essentially these praises they were given in Psalms. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple, they wept aloud because they saw the foundation. They weren't impressed with the foundation. No one could distinguish between the shouts of joy from the young people or the younger people and the sound of weeping from the older, and the sound was heard far away. But Lord realized this, and he gives them some encouragement from Haggai. In the 7th month, on the 21st day of the month, the word of the Lord came by the hand of Haggai the prophet. He's telling Haggai, speak to Zerubbabel, speak to Joshua, so speak to the governor, speak to the high priest, and say to them, who is left among you who saw the house in its former glory? That's those people who were older. Remember, it's been 47 years since the temple was destroyed. How do you see it now? Not too good. Is it not as nothing in your eyes? Yet now be strong, O Joshua. Be strong, Zerubbabel. So be strong. 2, work. Be strong, work, for I'm with you, declares the Lord of hosts, according to the covenant that I made with you when you came out of Egypt. My spirit remains in your midst. Fear not. Be strong, work, fear not. And here's the words of encouragement. The latter glory of this house shall be greater than the former glory under Solomon, says the Lord of hosts. And in this place I will give peace, declares the Lord of hosts. The Lord of hosts is a term for the Lord in a military sense. Strength. When you hear Lord of hosts, think of the strength of the Lord. And he can give you peace. Don't worry about these people. So Zerubbabel's temple. If you Google Solomon's temple, you'll get a bunch of pictures. Herod's temple, a bunch of pictures. Zerubbabel's temple. This is what I found. And this comes from the ESV Study Bible. The only information given in the biblical account about the architecture of Zerubbabel's temple is the dimensions, which is 60 cubits high and wide, so 90 feet by 90 feet. As there is no mention of the length of the building, these dimensions must refer to the facade of the temple. But 90 feet, it's taller than Solomon's temple. Solomon's temple was only 45 feet, so it's twice the height, but that doesn't look like much, does it?
It's about as tall as Nebuchadnezzar's image.
Yeah, 90 feet. So let's look at the 3. So there's Solomon's temple. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? This is what the people were remembering.
Yeah.
Then you get this? Ooh, that's horrible. I remember when I was growing up in high school, some of my classmates, I didn't know them, they burned down the grandstand at the county fair. Beautiful thing, had a roof, everything, a place for the band to play. They didn't have much money, so they built another grandstand out of concrete. No cover. You go there and you're baking. This is in August. You're sitting on concrete with no roof. So so we know what they felt like, Oh, we go from the nice grandstand to this. So here's Solomon's temple, 120 feet tall. So we got 45, 90, 120 feet. So pretty good, huh? Now, Zerubbabel's temple wasn't torn down, as you say. It didn't get destroyed. It was, just a major renovation. So we have the first temple, Solomon's, and then a second temple included Zerubbabel's and Solomon's.
So Zerubbabel's temple is basically absorbed into the other buildings.
Yeah. So emotions. What is an occasion in your life that was emotionally powerful that it brought tears of joy? Can you think of any? Here comes the symbols again. Okay, the one that I thought about that was really emotional, November 9th, 1989. What happened? If you were in Berlin, what happened?
The wall fell down, came down.
Tears of joy. 1989, 1990, I was in the Air Force, Air Command and Staff College, and somebody from our class got a piece of the wall, and they donated it to the school. So that was a gift from our class, piece of the Berlin Wall. Okay. Out of time. Thought to remember, praise God for his enduring mercy. Next week is Nehemiah, covenant renewal. And that's it.
Thanks, Warner. Hey, Royce.